Welcome into SportsSource.tv. We appreciate you checking out our overtime segment every week. It's brought to you as usual by Jinx Logos. You see the phone number 755-7767. If you're in the 865 or if you're in the 423 area code, you call 865 in front of that, 755-7767. Jinx Logos, whether it's mugs, anything with your logo on it. Basically, if you're trying to promote your company, Jimmy Andrews and Jinx Logos should be your right-hand group because they do a tremendous job of that. I've dealt with a lot of these companies over 20 years at multiple television stations. This is the best group I've ever seen, and that's in the states of Ohio or Tennessee. Jimmy Andrews and Jinx Logos. I can give them no better recommendation than that. I use them. You should use them. Jinx Logos. All right. Guys, excuse the lengthy intro here, and then I'm just going to let you guys talk amongst yourselves. All right. Tennessee's basketball program currently sits under an NCAA black cloud. A lot of fans blame the university, first of all, for not standing by Bruce Pearl in the face of then very stiff show cause penalty. A lot of fans blame them for hiring a guy who wasn't a showman in Cuonzo Martin to replace Bruce Pearl. Some other fans blame UT for not putting their foot down on the petition and squashing it. Some blame them for not giving Cuonzo Martin a better buyout and keeping him. And a lot of folks now blame Tennessee officials for having hired a guy in Donnie Tyndall who comes in with NCAA black cloud. All right, so UT brass bad. On the other side of the coin, on the flip side, it was Bruce Pearl who lied about the cookout, and he had more than one illegal cookout from what I understand. It was Cuonzo Martin who came in with his own bunker mentality. He could have been a song and dance guy like Bruce Pearl if he wanted to. It was a group of fans who shot the school in the foot with the petition, and it's Donnie Tyndall or his staff who apparently did something at Southern Miss to the fact that Southern Miss went ahead and self-imposed penalties on itself. So my question is, UT, kind of in a holding pattern in basketball, under a cloud. Do you blame the UT officials, or were they victims of circumstance?
I'll start off with victims of circumstance. I think it all just goes back to Bruce Pearl. It goes back to Bruce Pearl lying to the NCAA, and that's where it all started to come undone. I mean, you got a pretty good basketball coach in Cuonzo Martin who people didn't seem to like. You know, the buyout, you could have given him a better one last year, maybe bought yourself some stability. But, you know, the Tyndall stuff, the Cuonzo Martin stuff, everything comes back to Bruce Pearl lying.
Yeah, and I still kind of get a little, curious still going when people say Tennessee should have stood by Bruce Pearl. I thought they did a lot to try and stand by Bruce Pearl through an unprecedented, 8-game suspension and everything that went with that, John. I still put a lot of this firmly on the doorstep of the UT athletic administration and the whole school and everybody there that was involved in this. You had a pretty good coach. You didn't squash that petition when it came out, and that told you right away they didn't have his back. And then you pretty much, by what he had accomplished in terms of the NCAA tournament run and insulting buyout, that he felt he was being set up to fail. And so, I mean, a lot of times you get what you deserve. I mean, and maybe he wasn't the most charismatic guy, but it was a really great person and a pretty good basketball coach.
The first shot that was fired, in my opinion, was by Bruce Pearl, and that's where it all started. Were there mistakes in the aftermath? Yes. But if he had not lied to the NCAA, he'd still be the coach, and Tennessee's program would be in better shape for it. So I go back to the origin of the whole debacle, and that was Bruce lying to the NCAA.
Okay, Mark Pankratz.
And I think Coach Pearl would agree with that statement, that it was him that got this. He was at fault. He's the one that lied to it. But the other side of the environment of that athletic program at the time, Bruce Pearl needed somebody in there to put his foot down on him and say, Bruce, look, you're not running the show here in the athletic department. But instead, they had people in place that just let him go amok and just keep doing what he wanted to do. And so ultimately, it got to that point where he thought he was invincible. And so he thought he could carry it in his own hands, go before the NCAA committee with no lawyers in place and be able to handle it himself, because he didn't have the people in place there to say, look, no, Bruce, you're not doing that. And the people above him just weren't doing that. Bruce
I guess they were. Were they too busy watching Lane Kiffin?
Well, see, I was about to say that, and that speaks to a bigger issue. I hate to drag Mike Hamilton back into this, but I think Mike Hamilton he found a pretty good basketball coach in Bruce Pearl, but he didn't watch him closely enough. found what looks like a pretty good football coach in Lane Kiffin. At least he did pretty well under Nick Saban, but he didn't watch him closely enough. So I think that's a very interesting point you bring up in terms of the administration above him. So if you had to, is that where you're leaning, the UT officials, or do you go to?
No, because ultimately Coach Pearl has to make those decisions. He's the one that has to, the words have to come out of his mouth. He has to put his team and his coaches and his program in that position. But it would have been aided in him making the proper decisions if someone was there to continue to make him do those things.
Okay, see, I'm a little more like Bob, not to the point that it was solely Bruce Pearl, but part of this is, I mean, it's all gray. I mean, there were errors made. All right, I don't know that you could take it just back to the one guy, but Conzo Martin just didn't have the charisma. He wasn't natural for it. From what I understand, they tried to push him and help him and guide him. Didn't really work. The Donnie Tyndall thing, that's on Tyndall. I think, I've made it clear since they hired him that I thought you can't go hire a guy with an NCAA black mark from Morehead State. But at the same time, you have to give all these guys some bit of the blame because they were all involved in it. I don't know that I go all the way back to, just Pearl did the first one, so that's where we leave it. It's like,
But
what about all
he needs to be the coach here if he hadn't done that. That's why I put it
I mean, that was
back
the
on
hole
that
in
end.
the dam. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where the water
Sad.
started coming out, and then everything else
started
happened
the
after
war.
that.
Yeah.
And when you look back on it too, I mean, I think he got caught up to, after being ranked number 1 in the country briefly, of wanting to compete with Calipari, who was at Memphis, of wanting to take the program to the next level. And you're looking around and you're saying, well, they're doing this school's doing that, they're getting away with this. Why shouldn't we push the envelope a little bit?
Yeah, well, Mark, you're over there. Are all these other schools cheating like dogs?
I would say that the majority of them, there's that gray area, and they're living as far close to that gray area as
Into
possible.
the-
I
How
think
many shades of gray?
Yeah.
50?
Yeah.
it's
I mean, that's a common refrain that everybody cheats. I don't know that everybody cheats. There's a difference between breaking rules,
Right.
bending rules, and flat out cheating.
But let's just say that
But-
it was the barbecue, the kid that was there that should have been there. If Bruce Pearl just goes in there
Three
and
kids.
says and spills his guts,
Yeah.
It's over.
the penalties are probably
Minor.
slight. You lose a
Or
scholarship, maybe. You have some recruiting
Or
restrictions.
even that one
So-
grainy black
Yeah.
and white photo from his kitchen.
So the question
Yeah.
is, do the other schools lie to the NCAA when they come calling? Everybody lives in the gray area, but when the NCAA asks them about it, do they lie
Or
about
if you're in North Carolina, does the NCAA even come call? You know?
Well, see, we don't know if they're in.
Or I mean, but how many schools actually get to where they're having to go in front and defend
Well,
themselves?
Syracuse did for 8 years. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting question because you could take it either way. Well, they're a victim of circumstance. Well, they're the ones that made a lot of these mistakes. They brought these people in who made mistakes. So it's chicken or the egg, but I thought it'd be a good discussion. Maybe it was. Maybe you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, we hope we'll see you next Sunday, March 22nd on the Sports Source, WATE, Channel 6, 11 a.m. Thank you very much for watching.